Good evening. We are back in workshop mode at 7:45 p.m. And we had some school board members in the queue just to speak to continue our reopening plan discussion. And we will start with Mrs. Riggs.
Actually, this question is for Dr. Spence. We are hearing from obviously a lot of people on both sides of the spectrum, wanting to come back, wanting not to come back. But I thought maybe if you would just share with us. We keep hearing from parents, I'm just seeing several other emails today, that we have been closed since March. And you guys have had plenty of time to plan for us to go back face to face for all these children. And you and I have talked about it before. I'd like for you, if you could, to please explain why it has taken so long. And I think we heard some of it tonight, but if you could just reiterate, maybe starting even with graduation or something, because we talked about it earlier. So could you kind of just go through that for people to see and hear about some of the situations and some of the things that it takes in planning a school system as large as ours
Well,
in a situation like this?
I'll try. We, as has been noted many times, we had about 3 day notice to close our schools. We initially thought that was going to be for 2 weeks. And so our initial reaction was, okay, how do we get through 2 weeks? And then it became clear it was going to be for the rest of the year. And so we had to go through a series of iterations of trying to communicate with you all in our community about how are we going to get through the rest of this year. And so that was what we were doing from March to June. Just get through the year, figure out how to get through the year, get our seniors graduated that needed to graduate. How are we going to handle graduation? I mean, just an endless series of questions in that moment about how do you end the school year. Graduation's middle of June. So we were, up until that moment, we weren't thinking about opening school, right? So for anybody who says, well, you have had since March to think about opening school, recognize we didn't have that luxury. We had to get school closed. From that moment, it was about 3 weeks until the board retreat. So in those 3 weeks between graduation and the board retreat, we had to put a plan together on how we thought we might reopen schools, give you our first best thinking on how we might open schools. And we had been thinking about it. I mean, we had been working with the VDOE on their reopening task force, and all kinds of ideas were swirling around. And then, you remember we got guidance that wasn't guidance about how to reopen. And so we had to sort of pivot off of that and then come to you and say, this is what we think we're going to do. And at that retreat, we determined, because it was asked, I remember, are we going to vote on this? That y'all wanted to vote on reopening. So that we then needed to nail down the detail. We got a kind of general sense from you of what you want to do. So then we needed to nail down the details and get back to you by the end of the month on how this could work. So y'all remember all of this. And we put those details out like as well as we could organize our thinking. And then you remember we came to you in early August and said, okay, this is it. This is where we're going. And we all nodded our heads and said, that's where we're going. And then my team had 10 days to build a master schedule. 10 days to build a master schedule to try to get kids back to school, which led to the pivoting and saying, well, the only way we're going to really get that accomplished is to just assign everybody to their schools and try to balance those classes out and keep everybody connected to their home schools. And then we'll work from there as school gets open. And then school opened. And we got school open. We got school open because of the amazing work of our leadership team here, of our principals, and of our teachers. And it wasn't flawless. It wasn't perfect. We didn't have all the answers. People were concerned. There was a lot of anxiety. We've all acknowledged that. And then, we started talking about, okay, school's open, but we got to bring kids back. So when and how are we going to bring kids back? And then we spent the remainder of the time getting kids back talking about how to get kids back and answering all of your questions and our community's questions about how do we bring children back and how do we do it safely and be prepared for that. And we did that in an incredibly short amount of time. Like a really heavy lift in a very short amount of time. And kids are now back. And as of last week, we brought back the last group of kids, like 3 days ago, school days ago, the last group of kids who we said we would bring back in that first phase of kids. So 3 days ago. So now we're talking about the next group. So I recognize, like sure, bring them back tomorrow, except it's not that easy. Because we've got to plan for that. We have to think about, and we have been thinking about, but remember, we've been moving. I mean, it's not like we had the luxury of 6 months to plan for this and then it all happens at one time. It's everything's been moving along as we've been going. I mean, so school had to get opened, and so we had to be ready for that without all the answers. And then we started bringing kids back, and so we were getting ready for that. And now we got to think about the next group, and so we got to get ready for that. So it isn't that we haven't been planning or working. I will speak for my team, and I will advocate for them, and I will stand for them in front of anybody at any time. Anybody who thinks this team in this building has not been working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week from March 13th onward, I get it. I hear teachers are exhausted. I hear our building leaders are stretched thin. This group here has done a yeoman's effort to get schools off the ground this school year in a way that's never been done. So have our teachers, so have our principals, but it isn't because we've been sitting around doing nothing. We have been working hard to make this happen, and it isn't because we've been waiting in between board meetings. I want to be clear about that. This has nothing to do with your schedule. This has everything to do with how hard and complex it is to open a school and to do it in 2 different ways and to do it in ways that we never have done before. So we didn't have all the answers, and then to try to provide in all of that, all of the answers. We have been asked, rightfully so, we've never argued about it, hundreds, thousands of questions about how's this going to work, how's that going to work, what's this going to look like. I mean, from the minutia of what does it look like if a kindergartner has to go to the bathroom, up to the big questions of like, how do you run a bus system in this new world? And everything in between. And we have had answers to those questions, and we have been working to get answers to those questions and to get our people ready. And we still have more to do to bring back other students. Like, how do we bring back students in middle and high schools in ways that are instructionally sound? How do we, the rest of them, how do we bring them back in ways that allow us to handle the operational challenges of moving them through our hallways? How do we do that in ways that allow us to address the operational challenges of transporting them on our buses, of feeding them, all the stuff that right there, listed on the slide right in front of you, as a matter of fact. We will get it done, just like we've gotten it done in answering all of the other questions. We told you we'll get school open, and school opened. And then we told you, based on our plan, we'll bring students back. And as of last week, students are back. And despite what you heard, it is going well. It is not, look, I'm not, no, nobody said it's going to look and feel like school looked and felt like before. We've never said that. We've said it's going to be different. We built, I said it, and I know it sounds like now I'm just saying it overnight, with 2 school systems from the ground up. The reason face-to-face is a new school system from the ground up is because it's totally different than we've ever done face-to-face school before. Because we've got kids in masks, and they do have to sit apart from each other at lunch, and it is a little sad. But that's our current reality if we're going to have kids back in school. But you know what you heard tonight? You heard an elementary school kid talk about, that's okay. I am so glad to be back. Did y'all hear that kid? And you heard a 10th grade student talk about how important it is for her to come back, how much she wants to be back in school, knowing that that's what it's going to look and feel like. And so it's not easy. We're not sitting back doing nothing. We have been building it as we go, and we have been doing, I think, an outstanding job given the circumstances. And I apologize to everybody, including our teachers last week in a video message, for how difficult this has been and how I wish it could be better. But quite frankly, compared to what I know is happening around the country, Virginia Beach City Public Schools is in a good position right now. We have kids back. There are many school divisions who don't. We have them back in ways that have included all of the mitigation strategies that have been recommended by the VDH, the CDC, the WHO, the VDOE. And we created an opportunity for people who didn't want that to happen to stay home and have their kids taught virtually. And it's not perfect, it's not flawless, and we have made changes along the way, and that's frustrating. I would be frustrated. I am frustrated. I've been frustrated by the changes. So is my team, by the way. I know our principals are and our teachers are, but those were dictated by the circumstances. And I'd like to say we were batting 1,000. But we're not batting 1,000. Sometimes we get things wrong. Like we think to ourselves, hey, in theory, we're going to be able to build these master schedules and they're going to be flawless. Let's just give everybody a choice. And then you go to build that schedule and you look at it and you go, can't be done. Here, and you start talking about the reasons it can't be done. And so instead of sitting around doing nothing and wringing our fingers and throwing our hands up in the air and saying we can't do it, this guy in the back and his team and his principals dug their heels in and said, we can do this. We're just going to have to do it a little differently. And we came to you and we talked about it and you said, okay. And what happened? We did it a little differently and kids are back in school with us. And we're going to have to continue to press forward if we're going to get other kids back in school. But I will say this. You asked a little bit earlier, why am I confident? I'm 100% confident we can bring more kids back. A, because I know that the health mitigation strategies that we have in place are working. B, because I see the data nationally that says schools that are opening are not super spreaders. And C, because I understand I got a team that can make this work and will make it work. Every time we've said we can make it work, we're making it work. And so, well, you didn't want all that. I apologize. But you got me on a soapbox.
Actually, I did. I felt like we needed to hear it. And I think if you're listening, you're hearing this as you guys are presenting everything. People should be hearing this. They should be seeing it. But we hear daily, y'all do too. We just don't understand why the kids aren't getting it. They're not getting this. The only people that are getting this and dying are the people that are in nursing homes and 70 plus older.
Well, that's not
Other
true.
people don't, that is true. But I think you pointed out the mitigations. All these people that want their children back do want them back safely. They have said that. So I just wanted you to point that out, that the mitigations, all of it, all of the working parts of it, the transportation, everything has to work together to keep everybody safe. So I wanted you to just share that again and just, how you did. Because I think people need to hear it again. Because apparently they're not hearing it. They're listening to these meetings because we hear some, we probably have the best ratings around for our meetings. But they're not hearing everything that's being said. So I just felt like it needed to be said one more time, and I appreciate that. And I want to say I appreciate every one of you, all that you're doing. I know you're working harder than anybody has besides our teachers and our principals. And I want to tell everyone out there that have been speaking and talk that we appreciate everything you're doing. And I know it's hard. I can't imagine doing it because it is very, very frustrating. But we've got to remember that everybody is living through this in every part of our life. And we're in the business of educating our children and keeping our children and our employees safe as we do it. So the way we are doing it, I think, is probably like you said. we get a lot of the information nationally from the National School Board Association across the country and from the state. And we've probably got one of the best systems so far in getting our kids back by phasing them in and doing it very carefully. And I really appreciate that you guys worked hard and you're putting up the dashboard to make our families feel, our employees feel safer. And I want to thank everyone out there that's working hard. Teachers, parents, everyone that is working together. So I just felt like it needed to be said again. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Ms. Riggs, for your comments. Those are my sentiments as well, and I know other people on the board too.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Edwards.
Yeah, amen to what you addressed a lot of what I would have asked. The complexity of assessing the need to get back into the schools, which you have pushed this school division to the forefront to get our children back in school, while dealing with it, doing it the right way in terms of the medical risk involved, that's the judgment call that falls on this group. Hearing from you and hearing from the medical experts and reading the ever-changing guidelines out of Richmond and the CDC, I think it's important to talk about the two metrics. From the positive test standpoint, we're green, very green, and likely to stay green. The other, the number of cases, that's nowhere near green. It's mid yellow, high yellow, but and it's likely to never get green this whole school year. So, do we sit back on our hands, keep the kids out of the buildings, because the number of cases, and the cases, as one of our email correspondents pointed out today, and had pointed it out to us previously, includes not only sick people, but it's a case is generated by any positive test result. And there are a number, I don't know the percentage, I'm sure the experts do, in terms of, that are not sick, but simply test positive because they have the antibodies. And how they got the antibodies, they either had it and didn't know it or whatever. But it's complicated, guys. We've got to assess, and I totally agree that we're driving up the middle, trying to stay safe, but not keeping our kids home from school forever. And I applaud the extent to which Dr. Spence and his team have assessed and are recommending and trying to get our kids into school a heck of a lot faster than our sister divisions in this region and much faster than most around the country, because we know academically they can't, it's not comparable. It's good. Virtual is as we've heard is working, but we all know it's not working anything like it would face to face. But more importantly, the other social emotional aspects of the children. And that's equally important. So while keeping our staff safe and our children safe, I'm very pleased. And yes, we need to look at those, but the final call belongs to this group here. And I think we need to keep on going and hear the input in 2 weeks. And just to reiterate, you just said it, Dr. Spence, it's not 2 weeks because we don't meet for 2 more weeks. It's 2 weeks because you have not, as we discussed over the meal break, you know, what you put up to us tonight hasn't even gone out to the schools for them to even start collecting input. They've got to collect, they've got to sit down and get input from their staff, figure out how things are going to work in each of their individual buildings, pass that to you. You've got to assess it, see how it can work on a system-wide basis, and then hopefully in 2 weeks, present us with a recommendation. So, I apologize, there was no question there, but there were things I think need to be said.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. Mrs. Weems?
Excuse me, thank you. I've got a couple questions. If, so much of the complications come from transportation, have we repolled, parents and guardians about perhaps, people would choose differently if they knew that their choice of perhaps driving their child to school could help out and could get, the transportation issue under, control and actually get our kids back to school earlier. So have we asked that question again since the first time? That's my first question. I'll let you answer that and then I'll go with my second.
So we have not relative to bringing these
Back.
students back. And we certainly can, as we're communicating that they're coming back, remind them that the more of them that drive, the fewer students have to be on buses. But transportation isn't the only thing. I bet if I asked Dr. Robertson, if he were to go to his principals tomorrow and say, hey, a week from now, everybody else is coming back, can they be ready? And if you go to our teachers and say, hey, a week from now, everybody else is coming back, those of you who've only been teaching virtually, you're not going to come into the schools, you're going to be teaching virtually and face to face, will you be ready? The answer to that's not going to be yes. Because it's just too complicated, both logistically and then in preparation for that. But beyond all of that, anyway, I think I went down a rabbit hole. Sorry about that. The answer to your question is we have not polled them, although we certainly can remind them of that once we begin communicating with those parents about coming back.
I didn't mean to insinuate that that was the only reason, but it has been told over and over that it is very complicated transportation. So I think that that might be a good thing to do because I feel that a lot of the parents would totally drive their children and students to school or carpool if that would help out, and I think it would. Earlier, I guess I didn't make myself clear. I don't think decisions are made because we meet on certain days or don't meet on certain days, but I would really think that it would be advantageous for this board to meet like we do in the budget season on a weekly basis while things are changing and while information is coming out, just for the fact of getting the information and being, transparent and all being on the same page and hearing it straight from Dr. Spence instead of, through the rumor mill and everything. So I would like to ask my colleagues if they would be interested in meeting, weekly for a few weeks, just in order to make sure that we're getting information. I don't think we need to wait 2 weeks, and we certainly didn't need to wait 3 weeks. And again, not make the staff, come up with something a week earlier, but just to inform us, because every time we meet, and that's what really disappoints me about adjourning a meeting a few weeks ago, every time we meet, we come up with questions and questions, and then questions bounce off of what somebody else says that we had, of course we can email them in, but a lot of this dialogue and conversation and questions come because of what a speaker says or what a fellow colleague says, or where someone at the microphone, what they say, and we bounce off of each other. So I think it's very helpful to have more meetings rather than less. And I would be all for meeting weekly for a few weeks, especially when we're trying to get these kids back in. If we go the same rate, I think some of the grades are not going to get in until, well after Thanksgiving. And I just think that it would be better to meet. So I'm asking my colleagues if they would entertain that suggestion. Thank you.
Well, I'll just intervene for a moment. We do have agenda planning tomorrow, but acknowledging everything Mrs. Weems has shared, I just want to also remind the public that there's a lot of communication that does go on in between meetings, so please understand the communications that go to families through from our communications department or from the superintendent also come to us. And we've gotten all the updates from our budget office too. And the committees that meet and peripherally may be dealing with these issues too. So I just want to acknowledge that, while the other questions on the table for maybe, and we'd have to consult with staff on preparation time for meetings. So I'll leave it at that for now, and it looks like we have Miss Anderson and Miss Owens on.
Yeah, I just want to say, I'm willing, I've already brought it up earlier, that I'm willing to meet every week. It doesn't bother me. I'm willing to meet every week in person. I don't have to Zoom, but I'd be willing to Zoom as well, whatever we choose. But the one thing I wanted to say right now was, we were just told during the meeting that, we're being given this reversion money back. And I've had a little bit of time to think about it, and I'm a little bit miffed over this whole reversion thing because that was money we saved. We saved that money because we were told that, we might be short. And now we're being given that money back as one-time money. And you know what we had to do last spring? We had to not give our teachers a raise, and we had to not give them their step. And I just don't think it's fair, and I think if there's anything we can do to show that we respect our teachers and that we appreciate what they've done, and for our staff how hard they've worked. If we can't at least reinstate the step increase, if we can't at least do that, then maybe we ought to think about using some of that money as a bonus to show how much we appreciate all the hard work that's been done. But I can't get over the fact that we took away their step, we took away their raise. Now we're asking teachers to do face-to-face and virtual. They're all working their tails to the bone. And staff has worked all summer, as you said, worked really hard. And I'm a little bit miffed over the fact that this is money. I know we're being given this money as what's called one-time money, but it's not fair. It's not fair that now we're being given it back and they're calling it one-time money. No, we can't use it for any raises or anything. So I think there's some way that we need to be able to think about how we can utilize this money to show how much we appreciate our staff and our teachers. Just had to say that.
Okay,
Mrs. Romney, because I just want to make sure we're clear. So first of all, we haven't been given that money back yet. We haven't reverted it yet. We would revert it first to council based on a resolution that you will develop and approve based on our conversation about where those monies should be spent. So there's time for that conversation, is what I'm saying. Second, that money does not, I want to be sure because I worry that our teachers would hear what you just said and conflate those budgets. That is from last year's budget. And last year, teachers got a raise. And they got a step increase during the last school year. At the beginning of the last school year, they got that raise and that step increase. That was last year's budget. That's where these reversion dollars are coming from. It's separate from this year's budget, which, we build our budgets based on what's projected from the state and what's projected from city council. And so then we build our budget around those numbers, and we don't go past those numbers because we want to be able to pay our bills. And so we have to think about this year's budget separate from that one. And so those reversion dollars, that's why it's one time when it comes back, because it is money from last year's budget. This year's budget is what it is. And the money and the revenues upon which this year's budget are built are different than what we got last year. So that's difficult sometimes for people to grasp. And I don't want, because I know somewhere there's a teacher listening who's saying, why can't they just use that to give us a raise? Well, if we did, we don't have that in this year's budget. We don't have those extra dollars in this year's budget. That's from last year's money. And this year we built our budget based on what we were told would be available to us. And so if we were to use that money, we would get to the end of this school year and you would have to ensure that that money was going to be available the following school year. Well, and I would say right now, given the economic conditions and the uncertainties, you can't ensure that as a board, so that wouldn't be a responsible decision. So we have to, I just want to make sure we're clear and we keep all those budgets separate in these conversations. But we'll be back to talk about the reversion and what could be done. Because to your point, a bonus is a one-time payment. We also have two other sets of funding that have become available to us. One is the CARES Act funding that you heard about earlier, and the other is CRF funding, coronavirus relief funds. And we'll talk about those the next time we're together and how those may be spent to provide some additional support for our teachers as well. For example, Mr. Honchik and I have had conversations about using that to dramatically increase the stipend for teachers who are having to teach in two different ways as one of the things that we might be able to do with some of those funds. So I promise, in 2 weeks, we'll have a good discussion about these monies and what can and can't be done with them.
I appreciate that. I mean, I stand corrected if it's not the money from this year's budget. I get that. I understand. I actually know what one-time
I know.
money means. I've been through this budget process for 7 years now, so, you know, I do understand that. But I just want people to know that we're not gonna just look at this and say, okay, we're gonna ignore the fact that you've worked diligently over the summer, and the teachers have worked hard over the summer too. So a lot of them, you know, stressed over the fact that they worried about how they were going to teach virtually. And we heard somebody tonight who said, you know, I'm looking for more training. So I know there's other ways that we can utilize that money as well, or even through training we can do some things to help our teachers. So I want everybody to know out there that, you know, we do appreciate what our teachers are doing and what our staff has done.
Okay, Miss Owens.
I was wondering if we could get an update on where we are with the staffing. There was, I guess, maybe 2 meetings ago where we talked about how many vacancies we had, how many we had hired, and we still had however many vacancies. I think having a good understanding of where we are staffing-wise and what we're expecting coming up with retirements and pending and stuff is important as we're considering bringing more kids into the school.
I heard most of that. Update on staffing is what I heard. Then I ran in here. And I want to say to Farrell that I'm not out of breath like he was when he ran down the hall. Actually, I am a little bit, but I was in Sharan's office watching. So it's I don't know what else to say. We get folks getting hired, and then we get folks resigning. There's instructionally, I just checked, as of last night, there were 62.5 FTEs, full-time teacher positions across the division. I talked to all my staffers today. I mean, they are hiring as quickly as they can, as soon as the principal's saying names in. We are doing everything we can to continue the flow of folks into the division. So I don't know what else I could say about that. We're doing okay. We got substitutes in classrooms. It's not ideal, but everybody, as Dr. Spence, I heard him say previously, there is not a division in this country, I think, that's not going through this right now. So I sent you a couple of weeks back a whole media blitz thing that we're doing just to give you guys an idea of what we're doing, trying to recruit bus drivers, custodians. Ann Glenn, I don't know if you saw it. She's our recruitment and retention specialist. She was on channel, whatever channel it was. We had 13. Thanks. And we're doing everything we can to keep it going. Our principals are working hard, and administrators at hiring, and we're making it work. Same thing with bus drivers, custodians, and my guys are going through the list as they come in. We just created a new report for them that, and this is probably more than you want to know, but when anybody applies, they could run a report now that shows that anybody applied for any position, teaching or whatever, in the last 2 days. So, you know, we're trying to keep it moving.
Okay. And so that it helps a little bit for the teaching positions, the 62. I think last time we talked about it, I don't know, it was maybe in the 70s, and so.
70 for bus drivers, I checked, and 40 for custodians
Okay.
as of last night.
And what about for school nurses and nurse assistants, nurse substitutes?
I don't have that number off the top of my head. Well, let me see if I do. I don't think we have.
I think the latest number I heard was 4. We were short 4 nurses.
4 nurses?
But we do have substitutes in there.
Yeah, okay.
Mary's,
Well, there we go.
Mary's got folks in there covering.
Okay. And how is the substitute list working really with the nurses? I am concerned that our nurses are going to have probably the most exposure because as soon as somebody is sick in the school, we're going to send them over. Obviously, they're going to be masked up and all of that. But
I don't.
if
Don,
they're
do you
out
know about
quarantining-
sub nurses off the top of your head?
Yeah, so right now, we're okay. We do have 4 vacancies, we have subs over there. We've got a couple of subs in reserve that, that Mary Shaw has access to. But like any other position, there's ebbs and flows to people coming in and going out.
So it is a concern to me if we're going to be bringing in more students into the buildings, that of all the positions, and obviously the teaching positions are incredibly important as well, but that if we're going to have a nurse that is sick or needs to quarantine or has a day off, whatever, that we know we're going to have somebody else serving as the nurse in that building. And so that's something that I would want to know that we really have secured and that we are preparing for additional absences with our nurses, our teachers, and everybody else, because we know that is, we're going to expect that.
I will tell you one interesting fact, just popped it, for nurse substitutes, we pay a premium for nurse substitutes. We do. I mean, we're way above with the surrounding divisions. I'm saying that publicly in case there's any nurses that want to substitute for us.
Well, I think I would just add on, and I'll say it to you in response to your concern, but I'll say it to the whole board. Our responsibility would be to come to you and say, hey, we got to shut this down because I don't have the staff to do it. But we're not there. I mean, we're not in that position. We are actively, continually hiring and planning. And if we get to a place where we feel like we can't have kids in the building because the staffing issues are such that that's not possible, that will be a time when we will come to you and say, we can't have kids in the building because the staffing issues are keeping it from happening. So we're not, in other words, we're not forcing kids into the building in a way that's unsafe because we don't have the staffing to do it. We have the staffing to do it, and we're bringing kids back because of that. So it's not the other way around, you know. And so if we get to a place where we feel it's unsafe, we don't have the right staff to support what we're trying to do in our schools, then we'll stop. But we're not there right now. So I just want to give you that assurance that we understand that's our responsibility. And none of my team, I mean, our principals are in daily communication with us about what their staffing needs are and what that looks like. But right now, we haven't had a person say to us, and we haven't diagnosed that we don't have the staff in place that we need to have children in the building.
Well, speaking to that point, can either you gentlemen share or know, because it was quite a list of new teaching hires we approved tonight. You know, I carefully went through I was just curious about age, if a good number of them were, you know, just out of college, or any feel for that?
No, I don't have a feel for that.
I mean, the fact that a
We're
number
hiring
did,
folks with 30 years, we're hiring folks with no experience, so. But I'll tell you what we'll do is, you know, when we come to you the first week in December, we'll put a little blip in there about of all the teachers we hired. We'll do something based on their years of experience. We're going to also break it down by ethnicity like we do usually, but we'll add years of experience in there too, so you got a general idea.
And I'm actually answering part of my own question. I guess part of the signal is if there's no previous employment noted, that they're the ones most likely to be just out of college. I'm
Yeah,
guessing, but
right, but you don't have any idea of how many years of experience when you're looking at the personnel report, so. But we'll add it to the December, that'll be a standard thing we do too. It's easy enough to add.
okay, thank
Well,
you.
Just let me say that any new teacher that comes into the division, I'm really proud of the support that they receive. We have a new teacher orientation program that if you get the beginning before school, it's a really robust 3 or 4 day program. If you come in after, we have ongoing professional support for 2 years for our new teachers. And every new teacher gets a mentor in the building that we've revamped the training and expectations for the mentors. So whoever's coming in, they're getting supported and they will continue to get supported for at least 2 years.
Thank you. And it's good to see young people still entering the profession. Okay, anybody else?
I just wanted, if nobody else has anything, I just wanted to end it with, this board does a really good job of listening to our teachers, our employees. We're very open. We listen and we ask our staff questions. I think that's something this board does really well. But I also want to say that our job as a board is also to support our staff, the people that work every day in this building, who are working so incredibly hard to get our kids back in school. And I think it's really important that this board supports them. I know sometimes people say to us, oh, you're yes men, you're always yes button this and yes button that. But quite frankly, you've never done anything that has not given us a reason to push the no button. You're really, really doing a phenomenal job. I know this is painful. I have 2 kids in college that are struggling with Zoom. I mean, they do it, but that's not where they want to be either. So, we do have to do this together. It is painful. So thank you to you all. Thank you to our teachers and our employees who every day are just doing what you have to do to survive. Thank you to the parents. Thank you for your support, and thank you for your patience. And I ask for continued patience. And more importantly, thank you to our students, especially the little guys in elementary school who are wearing those masks. And that's what I'm hearing from principals. It's not what they expected. They're keeping them on, and they're doing what they're supposed to do. And like little Joshua said tonight, just the joy that he found in a boxed lunch and a breakfast cart. Thank you for that. Thank you for finding joy in this mess. And I'm going to do my job to continue listening to our employees and to continue to support you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Melnick. So I believe that, okay, we are good. We thank all of the staff for for coming back to us for this extended workshop. So with that, I'm going to ask Mrs. Melnick to please make a motion to read us into closed meeting.
I make the following motion that the school board recess into a closed meeting pursuant to the exemptions from open meetings allowed by section 2.2-3711 part A, paragraph 1 of the Code of Virginia 1950, as amended for the following reasons. Personnel matters. Discussion, consideration, or interviews of prospective candidates for employment, assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, disciplining, or resignation of specific public officers, appointees, or employees of any public body, and evaluation of performance of departments or schools of public institutions of higher education where such evaluation will necessarily involve discussion of the performance of specific individuals pursuant to section 2.2-3711A 1, namely to discuss requests for payment of legal fees for an employee. And legal matters, consultation with legal counsel and briefings by staff members or consultants pertaining to actual or probable litigation, where such consultation or briefing in open meeting would adversely affect the negotiating or litigating posture of the board, or consultation with legal counsel employed or retained by the board regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel pursuant to section 2.2-3711A7, namely to discuss legal requirements for payment of employee legal fees.
Is there a second? Mr. Edwards, thank you. All in favor, please raise your hand.
Madam Chair, we have a unanimous vote.
Can you, for the record, specify who is present to vote yes?
Yes, and just note that the two members, Ms. Weems and Ms. Hughes, will not be able to participate since they are in the meeting via Zoom.
Everyone who's not, obviously.
So do the owl eyes have to go off?
Just go back on.
Or does that have to happen on camera?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it has to be, the public has to be able to observe you certifying closed and any motions you make afterwards. So we'll have to go back to at least Zoom.
Remaining action items, agenda item 18. And the action item is reimbursement of employee legal fees, the amount as presented in the closed session. Is there any further discussion? Okay, a motion to approve. Mr. Edwards, second? Mrs. Melnick. Okay, all in favor, raise your hand. All opposed?
Okay, Madam Chair, we have 4 ayes in Ms. Anderson, Ms. Melnick, Ms. Rye, Mr. Edwards. We have 4 opposed in Ms. Owens, Ms. Felton, Ms. Riggs, and Ms. Holtz, which makes this a lost motion.
All right, then that with that, we are adjourned.